Alright, Shalom on the Christ, Shalom Spatah. There's an officer of 1,000. Yahweh, teaching a Monday night class. I'm with ISUBK, in this ISUBK Atlanta, under Commander Junior Hana. Slide this over for me a little bit. Slide this one over for me. Or you could just move this off, or just slide it over. You could. All right, no, but you can leave the tray there. Just probably slide it over so it can be seen. All right. Okay. All right. All right. Anybody in the conference call at all? Anybody in the conference call? All right. Yeah, turn that down for me a little bit. Turn that down for me a little bit. All right. Today's topic is the Arabs' hand in our slavery, right? Okay. All right. Now you see all the time we always go against, our so-called oppressor, right? The so-called Edomite. We always talk about them. A couple weeks ago I talked about what the Africans did, right? We showed about how they were rounding us up as well, right? But a lot of things, it's one thing that people really don't get into. They don't talk about the slave trade that the Arabs did and how they took a part in our slavery as well. All right. Let me go here. Okay. Has anybody ever heard of the Silk Road slave trade? Anybody ever heard of that? Let me go this side here. Trying to see if there's any questions on. Trying to get signed in so I can see if there's any questions on here. Okay. Anybody you ever heard of the Silk Road slave trade? Well, basically, there was always different, trade routes, and one of the big trade routes, which is because remember when I was explaining about how Mecca was, it was like all of Arabia was a big slave route, because going in through that little bit connected Africa up to Asia and also up to Europe, right? So going through their country was a trade route. So another part of the trade route, one of the other commodities they had on the trade route was slaves, right? So here it says slaves like silks, because that's what they had, the Silk Road. One of the biggest things they sold that came out of China was silk. That was like their biggest export at one time, because nobody else knew how to make silk. They didn't know how to weave silk, which came from the silkworm. It was like a hidden gem that they were able to produce that nobody else would. It was like the thing, man, how did the Chinese, they make this silk, man? It's all real smooth, and they kept it a secret for hundreds of years on how they made it. It wasn't until maybe not even that long ago, maybe a couple hundred years before people actually found out that it came from silkworms, right? That silk, they would grab up all the silk that a certain type of worm would make, and they would make silk out of it, right? Make clothing out of it. And that was like the thing, was that silk, right? Because if you ever had silk before, it's like real soft, it's shiny, all of that, right? So slaves like silks were Silk Road goods to be bought, used, and sold for profit, and often transported long distances by land and sea to trade in foreign markets. While no slaves from this time survived to tell their story, they have left traces in art, archaeology, and text. From these, we can see that slavery was found throughout the Silk Road, not particular to any culture, place, or period. Its importance to the Silk Road economy probably rivaled that of the silk, horses, or other goods. Yet slaves rarely had a central of any role in the Silk Road histories that are told today. So what it's saying is, out of all of this, stories about the slaves being sold on Silk Road, there was no stories being made of them, right? Nobody knows of the history of it like today, because the more we get into modern times, the more writing is available. More people can write. There's more things being put, being, scribed on different, forms of writing on paper and all of this, right? So let me see. All right, slave markets were found across the whole of the Silk Road, from Dublin on the shores of the Atlantic to Shandong on the Pacific. And while much of the trade was private merchants, governments also profited by imposing taxes both on the movement and on the sale of slaves. As with many other things traded along the Silk Road, there was both local and regional trade, as well as trade over long distances. Dublin, for example, probably the largest slave market in Western Europe, was convenient for the Irish, Vikings, and others who had seized captives and raised in battles. Shandong in eastern China was specifically for selling on slaves captured from the Korean peninsula. But one of the most extensive trading networks, certainly by the 9th and 10th centuries, was that in Slavs, captured by the Rus in northern Europe and sold at the capital of the Bulgars, Bulgar, and the capital of the Khazars. Uh, and there's somebody that was there at that time. He wrote this, right? But yeah, I want to talk a little about the Khazars. Like a lot of, I'm gonna get in. That may even be the topic of next week. We get into the Khazarian Empire. The Khazarian Empire is where your modern day Jewish person comes from. Because they're Khazars, right? And they were around at this time trading slaves as well. It says, I saw the Russia when they came hither on their trading voyages and encamped the river Itil. With them there were fair maidens who are destined for sale to the merchant, and they may have intercourse with the girl while their comrades look on. So that's just another disgusting heathen custom. Like they want to lay and have intercourse with this girl while everybody else look at it, right? When their boats arrive, come to this anchorage, each one of them goes ashore and prostrates himself before the great image, and then says, "O my Lord, I have come from a far country and have with me so many slave girls for such a price and so many sable skins. I wish that thou shouldest provide me with merchants who has many dinars and dirhams, and who will buy me from at the price I desire." That's different types of money, right? That's what the dinars and dirhams were. That was different types of money. All right. All right. So that just like tells you a little bit about the slavery that was going on there. So, like I said, people always think that it was just always, they were just coming over to Africa, stealing people and just taking them. No, it was already a set in stone slave trade that was going on. So this was going on before everything else, right? So we're gonna get into the whole history of how the Atlantic slave trade came. All right. Do you know how to? Can you check and see if anybody got any questions at all? I might be able to see on here. Give me 1 second.
Anybody in class have any questions? Slack out of one.
Hey, Shalom on Christ.
Shalom, Lord Christ.
You can hang up now. You can hang up now. You can hang up now, Barack.
Shalom, y'all about to say over the I'll see how we die.
Shalom Spatha, what's going on, huh?
I'm too old, I don't want you to walk.
What's wild? All right.
It's like it's a little crazy. Like a lot chicken ass, sir.
That shit on the Christ. Let me get y'all wrote down. All right. Done. And Makolat. Is that it on the call?
Salaki, you get triple Kashan?
Yeah, I got you.
Count.
All right. All right. See some. Let me see. All right. There you go. All right. Let me see. See if I can get the questions and everything. Let me see. All right. Do any of y'all know anything about the Silk Road slave trade? Any of y'all brothers know about that at all?
Salaki, sir. What was the question at the one?
Do any of y'all know about the Silk Road slave trade? Guess not. All right. Well, basically, it was like the silk. It was like the Silk Road. It was like a it was, at first it was like a it was like a trade path. Like it was a trade route. Like it was for trade was set up to go from one place to another, and one of the they called it a Silk Road because one of the biggest trades that they had was silk, which came from China, which came from silkworms, right? That was like one of the new things everybody wanted. So they named it the Silk Road slave trade. So then, of course, they also had slaves they were selling during that time as well. All right. Let me keep reading about here. All right. This man here, he records a wider network extending from Western Europe through to Africa, Arabia, India, and China, run by Jewish merchants whom he refers to as Radhanites. It is worth quoting in full as one of the few detailed and extant itineraries. So this Jewish person is talking about our enemies. It's not talking about people that was the actual Jews during this time. Because you see, and just before that, it was talking about the people from Khazar. The Khazars, they came and took our who we are. This just shows proof of it. They were the ones that was brokering the deals of all of the trade, right? This was just the beginning. This was just, like I said, this was the Silk Road slave trade. So you think they didn't have a hand in our slave trade when they was at the trade from the beginning? All right, and it said these merchants speak Arabic, Persian, Greek, Latin, Frankish, Andalusian, and Slavic. They journey from west to east, from east to west, traveling by land and by sea. From the west, they export eunuchs, young girls and boys, brocade, beaver pelts, marten, and other furs, and also swords. So they took eunuchs, which was people that they took their man parts off, their stones, and he made them because they were scared of them laying with their wives, right? These Muslims, and they were scared of them laying with their wives. So they ended up taking them as eunuchs, right? They set sail from Forange, which is France, on the Western Sea, then head for Pelusium in Egypt. They transferred their merchandise to the back of camels and traveled to Clysma, which is a place that's on the Red Sea, a distance of 25 farsakhs. They sailed down the Red Sea to Al-Jar, the port of Medina, and then to Jeddah, the port of Mecca. So they was in the slave trade, the Meccans, which was the people that was the Ishmaelites. They was deep in the slave trade. Then they continued to sing India and China. They returned from China with musk, aloe, wood, camphor, cinnamon, and other Eastern products, docking again at Qualzon. Then proceed to Faramah, from where they again set sail on the Western Sea. So that's how, like, all of these ships they were doing trade on, these were the Muslim ships, right? These were the Arab ships that they were on. These journeys can also be made from land. The merchants that start from Spain or France go to Sus al-Aqsa, which is near Tangier, and then to Tangier, whence they walk to Kairouan, which is the capital of Egypt. Thence they go to Al-Ramaya, visit Damascus, Al-Kufa, Baghdad, and Al-Basra, cross Aves, Fars, Kerman, Sin, Hin, and arrive in China. So they go all in the Middle East and then head to China. Sometimes also they take the route behind Rome and passing through the country of the Slavs, arrive at Kimlich, the capital of the Khazars. They embark on the Georgian Sea, Caspian Sea, arrive at Balkh, betake themselves from there across the Oxus and they continue the journey toward Yurt, right? Which is like the Turkic lands in Central Asia. From there to China and all, they go all around. This place was going all over the Middle East, Europe, and Asia, right? It was going all over these lands. It was not only the merchants that profited from the slaves, the governments of the lands they passed through, or ports of embarkation, and the markets they sold at often imposed taxes or monopolies. For example, although there was a slave market at Constantinople, in the Valley of the Lamentations was the Valley of Sorrows. Several contemporary sources note that merchants often avoided it because of the high taxes, and that ships docked instead at Antioch in 8th century, Canfu, which is present day a place in southern China. All goods coming into the port were controlled by the government office of the Commissioner of the Commercial Argosies, which purchased all imports desired by the government. Turkic male slaves for the Caliphate's army were taken from the borders of steppe in Central Asia to Nishapur, which sent thousands of slaves westward to Baghdad each year. Male slaves can be transported against the Amud Daria only with a government-issued license costing from 70 to 100 dirhams, right? So they was going around selling you from all different places, right? Selling slaves. So they were like the big people in selling slaves, right? I remember one time, anybody ever see that movie Roots? You ever seen that? Next time y'all go watch the movie Roots, right? When they when they came and got old boy, one thing they didn't expect nobody to see, it was actually an Arab in the back that was there taking them. Watch next time you watch the movie, you're gonna see one of them not a meat treat, but you know them the ones that Arabs be wearing. You gonna see that. I forget what you call them, but yeah, you gonna see that on his head, right? Because they were selling us, man. This was part of the slavery. It was like all nations were coming together to keep us in, they have us in slavery. All right. Any questions on that at all? All right. This is another article on it, right? It says over the years, global focus and discourse on slavery has concentrated on the transatlantic trade and featured Americans and European merchants. On one other trade, however, has remained largely ignored, at times even treated as a taboo subject, despite being a key component of the African history owing to its devastating impact it has had on the continent, its generation, and the people's way of life. The Arab Muslim slave trade, also known as the Trans-Saharan trade or Eastern slave trade, is billed as the longest, having happened for more than 1,300 years, while taking millions of Africans away from their continent to work in foreign land and in the most inhumane conditions. Scholars have christened it a veiled genocide, attributing the tagline to the most humiliating and near-death experience slaves were subjected to, from capture in slave markets to labor fields abroad and a harrowing journey in between. While official figures on the exact number of slaves captured from the African and Trans-Saharan trade are contested, most scholars put the estimate at about 9 million. So if they saying it's 9 million, it's probably 100 million. For real, right? Probably a lot more that didn't get tallied up and all of that, right? The Eastern slave trade in Africa was predominantly concentrated in the East and West African regions. In East Africa, the coastal region was the preferred route, and Tanzania's archipelago of Zanzibar became a hub for this trade. The Arabs raided sub-Saharan Africa for 13 centuries without interruption. Most of the millions of men they deported have disappeared as a result of inhumane treatment. The painful page in the history of black people has apparently had not been completely turned. Read a loosely translated excerpt from a veiled genocide book by this person here, Franco. That's a Franco-Senegalese author and anthropologist. Enterprising Arab merchants and middlemen would gather in Zanzibar for raw materials, including clothes and ivory. They would then buy black slaves who they would use to carry the raw materials and also work in their plantations abroad. Slaves from as far as Sudan, Ethiopia, and Somalia would be availed at the Zanzibar market and shipped through the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf or Arabic Peninsula, where they were worked in Oman, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. African Muslims were, however, never captured as slaves due to the Islamic legal views. Because, now here's the thing. Now at this time, it wasn't all Israelites that was being captured, right? During this slave trade, it wasn't all Israelites, right? This was a mixture of a lot of people. But we became the primary, during the transatlantic slave trade, we became the primary source of slaves, right? We became the primary source. So, and if a lot of people don't know, it was a lot of times, I'm gonna see if I can find a picture, but there was times you would see black people, Israelites over in Africa, right? They had garments on and they would look like Muslims, but had fringes at the bottom of their garments, still trying to hold on to their culture just a little bit, right? Because they had, Muslim legal views. They didn't want to enslave another Muslim, right? They don't believe in that. They want to, if you was a Muslim, okay, we ain't gonna enslave you. So they it was black people dressed up like Muslims, so they wouldn't be put as a slave, man. You had to go take on a religion of your oppressor just so you wouldn't be enslaved, man. And it says, on the other hand, the trans-Saharan caravan concentrated on the West African region, straddling the Niger Valley to the Gulf at Guinea, along the trans-Saharan roads to slave markets in Maghreb and the Nile Basin. That voyage will take up to 3 months involved inhumane conditions that saw slaves die along the way due to diseases, hunger, and thirst. An estimated 50% of all slaves in this trade would die in transit. So they said 9 million people they sold in slavery. So that just shows you only half of them made it across there. So when they try to that's why at Isupk we don't just hate the number one oppressor. We hate all of them. We hate the Arabs too, man, because they put us through, in some cases, even worse treatment, man. Where you think when it comes to a lot of times when it comes to what devils do, they take a part of it and it's like they get inspiration on how to be even bigger devil. They took inspiration from what they did and say, I'm gonna be a bigger devil than you. And they started being even worse than even what the Arabs was doing, and they was being inhumane, man. They was letting you get cooped up and die next to your brother. That's why they didn't care about putting you on those slave ships, right? Those slave ships that had you, defecating and urinating and sisters on their flour. They just let it flow on the boat. All that stuff just going in and keep getting everybody sick and dying, man. That's why they didn't care, because the Arabs did the same thing, man. They had you on boats too. We just seen about the boats they had going back and forth. They said it was inhumane treatment, and people was dying. They was dying from being in close quarters like that. So what do you think they were doing? They had them on ships, right? Had them on ships. They had them on, probably in wagons, all of this, right? Being captured and taken as slaves, man. While European merchants were interested in strongly built young men as laborers in their farms, the Arab merchants were more focused on concubinage, capturing women and girls who were turned into sex slaves while living in harems, man. So high was the demand that the merchants would double the price of female slaves with the ratio of captured women to men from being 3 to 1. So it was more, so at this time, it was okay to capture women. It's not against Arabic, tradition to start putting people as slaves, right? So everybody that think they're Arabic, it's okay for them to put your people as a slave. Right. That's why the Bible's a pure, that's why I love the Bible so much, man. It makes you be on top and everybody else is your slave. But then it also tells you, even still, even though they might be your slave, you got to treat your slave with a certain amount of dignity, man. It ain't no dignity in the Quran. Matter of fact, I even looked up some of I don't know if you call them scriptures or not, but I even looked up a couple of their passages, I would call it, in the Quran that tells you a lot of these things, right? All right. Male slaves would work as field workers or guards at the harems to ensure they would never reproduce in case they got intimate with their fellow female slaves. The men and boys were castrated and made eunuchs in a brutal operation where majority would lose their lives in the process, man. They cut their rods off and they stones, man, so that they wouldn't lay with other slave women. Right? They didn't want. They had harems. They had whorehouses. That's what a harem is, a whorehouse. Right? The practice of castration of black slaves in the most inhumane manner altered an entire generation as these men could not reproduce. The Arab masters sired children with the black female slaves. This devastation by the men saw those who survived committing suicide. This development explains the modern black Arabs who are still trapped by history. So they got people over there that look black as Arabs, right? And even as Europe, one of the key players in the African slave trade, abolished this practice hundreds of years ago, and the United States officially ended it in 1865, Arab countries continued the slave trade with majority ending in the late 20th century. That's 1999, man. Late 20th century, man. In Malawi, slavery was officially criminalized in 2007, with mentions of some Arab countries currently being involved, albeit clandestinely, which means secretly. Even as the rest of the world realized the harm slavery did to an entire continent and made a declaration to abolish it, the Arabs protested it. And it took a lot of international trade and revolt by the slaves for them to end it. But it is the degree and intensity with which it altered the entire social, reproductive, and economic life of black people that made it more brutal and painful than the transatlantic one. So because of how long it was and just how profitable it was, that it made it even worse than the transatlantic slave trade, right? Now, y'all see they was taking slaves from this part, right? Why did... Now, a lot of times, like, people don't know why, I'm trying, how do I phrase it? Like, during this time, they had slaves being brought in from, the Saharan, right? Why did it start coming all the way to the other side of Africa, right? We was running from there, man. We was getting up out of there because they was trying to take us as slaves. We was running down south, and we started settling into the western side of Africa, right? Because we running from this. So that's how we got from the east side of Africa all the way to the west side, because we was running this whole time. We was slaves up in Europe. They had us on a slave trade, trading us over the Arabs, all of this, man. Right? But they don't want to say black people was in Europe, so they not going to admit to say that, they was selling you over there too. But you was being sold from Europe and everywhere. All right, any questions on that? All right. Anybody ever heard of Mansa Musa? Ever heard that before, Mansa Musa? What y'all know about Mansa Musa? Go ahead.
He was the richest man. He was from Africa. He was an African Hamite. He was the richest, so the wealthiest man on earth at that particular time.
That's right. All right, but what is he kind of known for doing too? Well, he took what you call it, a Hajj, where you take a little pilgrimage to Mecca. That's what he's known for doing. And he exposed the so-called wealth of Africa, right? Well, here we go. Mansa Musa, 14th century emperor of the Mali Empire, is the medieval African ruler most known to the world outside Africa. His elaborate pilgrimage to the Muslim holy city of Mecca in 1324 introduced him to the rulers in the Middle East and in Europe. His leadership of Mali, which a state that stretched across 2,000 miles from the Atlantic Ocean to Lake Chad, and which included all parts of the modern nations of Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Burkina, Mali, Nigeria, and Chad, ensured decades of peace and prosperity in Western Africa, right? In 1312, Musa became emperor following the death of his predecessor, Abu Bakr, right? When he was crowned, he was given the name Mansa, meaning king. Mansa Musa was knowledgeable in Arabic and was described a Muslim traditionalist. He became the first Muslim ruler in West Africa to make the nearly 4,000-mile journey to Mecca. Preparing for the expedition took years and involved the work of artisans in numerous towns across Mali. In 1324, Musa began his pilgrimage and with the entourage and thousands of escorts. He also brought considerable amounts of gold, some of which he distributed along the journey. Accompanied by thousands of richly dressed servants and supporters, Musa made generous donations to the poor and charitable organizations as well as the rulers of the lands as entourage crossed. On his stop in Cairo, Egypt, the emperor gave out so much gold that he generated a brief decline in its value. He had that much gold over there, man. He made a decline. That's just like he gave so much money somewhere. Like, you know how the government, they give us a whole bunch of money, they give somebody a whole bunch of money. It makes the value of the money go down because they just gave it away. That's what he did. They didn't have to even earn it. That's how much gold and money he had, right? Cairo's gold market recovered a decade later, or Cairo. So it took a whole 10 years to recover because he dropped off that much gold, right? Upon his return from Mecca, Mansa Musa brought Arab scholars, government bureaucrats, and architects. Among those who returned with him, the architect Isupk who introduced advanced building techniques to Mali. He designed numerous buildings for the emperor, including a new place named Madagu, the mosque at Gao, the largest city in Mali, and the still standing Great Mosque at Timbuktu, the largest city in the empire. That mosque was named the Jingaraber. El Tujan's most famous design was the emperor's chamber at the Malian capital of Niamey. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage boosted Islamic education in Mali by adding mosques, libraries, and universities. The awareness of Musa by other Islamic leaders brought increased commerce in scholars, poets, and artisans, making Timbuktu one of the leading cities of the Islamic world during the time when the most advanced nations from Spain to central India were Muslim. Timbuktu was clearly the center of Islamic sub-African Africa. Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca brought Mali to the attention of Europe. For the next 2 centuries, Italian, German, and Spanish cartographers produced maps of the world which showed Mali and which often referenced Mansa Musa. The first of these maps appeared in Italy in 1339 with Mansa Musa's name and likeness. So this is how they started coming over to the western side of Africa. They started going to sub-Saharan, and the sub-Saharan was full of us, right? Because we running from being taken. Because when it's like a nation or whatever, they come into a land, right? They don't just all the time going to one place. Some people stay here. Some people keep traveling. Some people find a decent place to live in, and they just keep traveling. It's like how the Native Americans did, right? The Native Americans and the northern tribes, they didn't stop in South America, right? They started spreading other lands, right? And they started making their own different tribes and all of that. So as they spread it, and some people running from, slavery, they started running, getting to sub-Sahara places. And Mansa Musa, he made his big pilgrimage. And now when that happened, all of the Arabs started coming over here, man. They started coming over to the side of Africa that we were sitting in. All right? Any questions on that at all? Any questions? Any questions? All right. Now y'all know about. Can you give me Psalms 83 for me real quick? Yeah.
What?
Let me see. Go to 2.
Psalms 83, verse 2. For lo, thy enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head.
They make a tumult, man, and they that hate thee have lifted up their head, right? They think of themselves as being higher than the Most High. Keep going.
Verse 3. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones.
And we was hiding from our captors, right? They have consulted against our hidden ones. Keep going.
They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation.
Yeah, we was already on the run, man. We was already, what do you call it? We call it refugees. We was already refugees running away from Israel, man, because the Romans came. The Romans came in 60 A.D. and sacked Jerusalem. So we already refugees coming into another land, right? Keep going.
That the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance.
They didn't want us to have a nation no more. They knew the greatness that we were. So they seen, like they talk about, everybody think they were just grabbing people and just making them to be like certain planners. Like, no, they had the whole thing systemized. The tribes stayed within their own different tribes. So then when they would go and grab up these tribes, they were good about doing this. They were good about doing that, right? The whole slave trade was organized. It was all the nations coming into one. They already had the trade routes from the Silk Road slave trade. They already had the routes. They knew what they were selling. They knew what they were buying. They knew all of these. They knew how much it cost for the slave. This was already going on for thousands of years. Well, maybe not thousands, but, for at least this part, it's been going on where they had it for like 1,300 years. It already been going on for hundreds of years, man. Hundreds of years already going on. So they knew what to buy, who to buy, how much to buy for, you know what I'm saying, and what it was used for when you bought it. Had all of that figured out. Keep going.
But they had consulted together with one consent.
Mm-hmm.
They are confederate against thee.
They came together with one consent, man. Their consent is to make money off of the children of Israel, man. That's what their consent is, to make money, make you not have a nation. Because they knew that they knew this Bible. They knew that whoever owns the Israelites is the most powerful nation on the earth. That's why Egypt was powerful. That's why the Persians and the Medes was powerful. That's why Rome, Greek, who else? All these other people had great nations at one point because they had us as slaves, man. They had the people of God as a slave. Keep going.
The tabernacles of Edom.
Edom. That's the so-called oppressor, the Caucasian. Keep going.
And the Ishmaelites.
That's your Arabs right there, man. They came together with each other. They was happy to be with each other. Keep going.
Of Moab.
Moab, the so-called Chinese. They was selling you too. It was named the Silk Road because they was the ones providing silk to buy you, man. They was giving silk to buy you. Keep going.
And the Hagarenes.
Hagarenes, other Africans, man. They came, brought you as slaves, man. They wanted you to be a slave. Keep going.
Gabal and Ammon.
Ammon, that's the Japanese, right? Keep going.
And Amalek.
Amalek, so-called Jewish, man. He was the brokers, man. He was the one that was imposing taxes, making sure, he was the one that, like, just like they do now, they the big brokers. They organize everything. Like, they the ones that, like, they have the ports, right? Like, people think, like, that they wasn't involved. They had the ports, the port of entries when you had to go onto different places to roam. They own the ports. They own the banks. They own all of this over there, man. In Khazari, they owned all of this. So they stretched out they antennas out to everywhere else to be brokers with them. Because, like, they figured, well, I don't have to have anything. They don't have to have anything. They don't have to have the slaves. They don't have to have any merchandise. They just be the middlemen. And so whenever something is middlemen, I got to take profit for even not even having anything. Right? Keep going.
The Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre.
That's more Africans, man. Came together, man, after us, man. So, all right, you could, everybody's read, everybody's heard that, man. You can drop that. All right. See what I'm going to read next. All right. Let's see here. There's another article. The Arab slavers were the first and last in modern times to ship millions of Africans out of the continent as slaves. Most people still have the so-called transatlantic slave by Europeans of mine, but in reality, Arab Muslim slavery was much greater. Hey, can you give me a water real quick? Give me a water bottle. Might be one back there. You see one? One by the microwave. Go ahead.
Khan, it's real heavy, sir, if I may. You know what? It's been said that it was so disastrous of the slave ships. A lot of brothers jumping off just to save their life of the ship.
Yeah.
And that even to this day, that the sharks, they swim that same route. Just it was so bloody and just so chaotic that even to this day, hundreds of years afterwards, the sharks still swim that route and seek food. You know what I mean? The slaves, Salakia.
Khan, that's true because all the blood that was shed. Because sharks, they can sense blood like 5 miles away or something like that. They can smell blood in the water like 5 miles away, man. I'm talking about like you get a paper cut and they can smell that 5 miles away. So it was so much blood being shed, you know what I'm saying? Probably from just, you got to even look at it as it doesn't even have to be them killing each other or whatever the case is. It could just be from, like when you get sick, if you're not able to take care of yourself, you get infections, man. And they would have the slaves jump on top of the ship, make them dance so they can get some exercise or whatever, wash them off. They wash that water that probably got sores on them that go into the water. Even just the minute things make it go, make the shark circle around, man. Well, go ahead.
It's a real heavy point what you're saying, on the topic and all, even the women, their cycle, just imagine those slaves being in that lower compartment stacked on top of each other, at sea for months, women cycle and stuff, them being unclean and stuff that way. It was a lot, for the rebellion and, women's flowers and, it was just so much, that kind of, linked all that. It's a real heavy topic, Slocky.
Exactly. So, like, the slave trade, it just pretty much jumped from the Silk Road slave trade, and it just went over here. The Silk Road slave trade was still going on. See what I'm saying? So, like, here's the trade, right? So a lot of y'all brothers, y'all been in logistics, right? Logistics is like when you go somewhere, you gotta go drop off, a shipment of something, but you gotta have something to come back with, right? That's the exchange of goods, right? So the Africans and the Arabs, what they wanted was weapons that the Europeans made. And the Europeans wanted more slaves. So they would trade the weapons so that they could go and take over more villages of Israelites, put them on the ships, and, they was able to win more wars. So, like, we could even fight against them because they had, we might have had sticks and stones or, bow and arrows, slings or whatever the case is. And they had, fire. They had firepower, right? So they used that to take over whoever when they used the weapons of the oppressors to take over anybody else that was trying to fight against them. What do you want to say?
Lock out of one. Were that true? Were they also trained to get more ships from the Arabs? Because I don't know. I have to research myself, but I also heard that that the Edomites and stuff were actually getting ships and stuff. They were actually getting them from the Arabs. Was that true?
That is true. Because we just read about those ships that was going to all the different ports. Like, see if I can get a map real quick. All right. You zoom out of here. See, like, I'm gonna see if I can put it on the camera. See, like, these maps right here, right? Going through all of this. They were going through all these different places in Turkey, all over here, setting up different trade routes. They were going here, going into Spain, going to this small gap, coming here down to this part of Africa. These were all trade routes going through all these different rivers. These were all trade routes coming through all of this. And the Arabs, they built a lot of the ships that they took to all the different places. Like up here, Romania, this is like what Khazaria was. So they would take people up here, and they became a lot of the, like I said, the brokers, right? The middlemen, taking it up to Greece, Croatia, Italy. All these different places have ports, right? And they made the ships so it can go to all these different places because, the Silk Road was going from like here through here and all throughout there. Let me see if I can get a map of the Silk Road. Hold on. See if I can get a picture of it. Slave trade routes. All right. See if I can get a good one. Okay. Can I hit that and make it bigger? Hold on 1 second. All right. This the Asia part of this. Hold on 1 second. This kind of the Asia part. So it will go all throughout here. But this is the part it will go into Africa. So it will go to all these different places. Right? It will go all over here, all over here to India, all over here. And then Africa was where they got all of the slaves from. Because remember, trying to see where Israel at. All right, yeah, this supposed to be Israel right here, right? And we started coming into Africa and all of that, right? They would come and grab us and start shipping us all over this other place. Now, this is the point. It wasn't just us at this point. So it was kind of like a lot of anybody that got captured, right? But then they would take us and send us all over to Iran, all these different places, and it was places coming to Europe as well. Let me see if I can find one that shows the spots in Europe. This one might be a good one here. This one might be a good one here. So you see, you had the ships over here in the Byzantine Empire. You would have the ships going all over here, all into China. So, because they had the silk going on here. But then people would bring all of their goods from wherever they were and bring them along this route. So they would come from north, come down south, south up to the north, and bring all of their goods to get exchanged along this route. All right. Somebody said Salakia.
Con. It's such a heavy. Where the whole class is so heavy, you know, we rarely hear the Arabic, you know, the slave trade and stuff they did, you know, and it's so heavy because we say it all the time, you know, when we read the scripture like Psalm 83, 6 and 7. Well, no, Slakia. Well, pretty much 4 through 6. It's just like the same thing they do, the same way how the Arabs and the Chinese and these American Edomites and stuff, how all of them worked together back then, they still work together and trade together, do business together the same way to this day. Everything they do is to work together to keep us down. And it's so heavy that all of them are Confederates. And you know, like today when we look at the Confederate flag, we automatically just think about that, you know, that redneck, you know, that old hillbilly Confederate redneck. And, you know, and when we see that flag, we think that flag just symbolize and, you know, represent his ideals and stuff. But that flag just don't belong to that redneck. It belongs to all of them. Chinese, Japanese, you know, like the American redneck, it belongs to all of them. The Arab and the book of Psalm 83 and 6, you know, shows those nations, you know, and it proves your point, you know, your topic so much. Slack.
Exactly. That is, they are Confederate. Like, Confederate just means you against the nation. The nation is Israelites. That's the nation. That's the nation. That's supposed to be the nation of the world. We are the nation of the world. I don't mean that every world comes here. We are the nation because we're supposed to be the ruling class of the world. We're supposed to give the example to the rest of the world. So we're the ruling class of the world. But they're all Confederate because they don't want us to rule. Because even in our captivity and the wickedness that we do have, right? So even though we have that, right, we still have more compassion for everybody else, man. We still have more than everybody else has, right? Like I think they did like a study. They said that when black people were judges, they would put as judges in, like, you know, for prisons and stuff like that. They were more fair than all the other nations. Our oppressor, they quick to throw, you know, black people in prison longer, but leave, you know, they counterparts in for less time for the same crime. But he said black people were more balanced, right? That's because we should be the judges on earth, man. We shouldn't have other oppressors, all these other nations being the judges on earth. Because you see, when they get power, what they do, right? They make a harem. They make a whorehouse, man. They literally make a whorehouse. And then make the other slaves watch it. And so that, like, man, think about how wicked this is, man. You make a harem, right? Right? Of whores, right? That basically, that's what that is, right? And you got them sleeping with other men, right? Hold on one second. right? You got all these men, right? A harem, right? That's what it is. Just a harem of just a bunch of women where they all live. A lot of times they were selling these women, right? But they so evil, they don't want you to lay with the women, right? They want to cut your genitals off, right? They have all the women. They don't want you to even have one, right? And they so scared of it, they want to cut all of that off so you can't even think about it. It's not even on your mind anymore, right? All right. Here goes some more on this. The Arab slavers were the first. Well, I think I said that. Even in the face of years of Black History Months, currently still remain Earth occupants, many of whom know little to nothing about the expansive role played by Arab and Muslim slavers in the African slave trade. Now, of course, we say in Africa, a lot of these were, in the majority, especially in the Atlantic slave trade, were Israelites. But, everybody thinks that they were African because they were residing in an African land, right? At any rate, yes, there is more to be told yet, so slowly catch your collective breath. The Arab slave trade is an act and above all a fact of history, and anti-Black racism is a shameful thing that must be confronted in Arab societies. Like, you think the Arabs are okay with you? You call them sand Negroes? No, they're more aligned with the oppressor than they are you. They're more friendly with them than they are you, man. They don't like you. We should not allow slavery to be relegated to only the European slave trade. The real truth about slavery includes the long, extensive, and deadly role played by Arab and Muslim slavers. Now, when they say all this, you see, we blame them all, man. We blame them, the oppressor. We blame the Arabs. We blame even the Africans, man. They all take a part in this. They all benefited. Like I told you when we was talking about the African role in slavery, right? They set up they made their country so rich from slavery. Like, they was making so much money off of slavery that when they abolished slavery, they damn near went bankrupt, man. That's how the oppressors was able to move in so swiftly, because they had the goods, right? Because they took, look, they took your slaves that made Africa great, which was Black people. They took them and put them into America and Europe and made Europe and America great. That's North, South, and the Caribbean, of course. They made them countries great. So then now they took all of their great people, made them great, and then they was getting money and weapons and jewelry that it gave them like a what's the word I'm looking for? It gave them how we had that big the housing market bubble. Y'all know what I'm saying? How we had the housing market bubble, and then when everything was said and done, it just all crashed. That's what they did. It was a bubble. It was the slavery bubble. See what I'm saying? So then because it wasn't based upon nothing but you, and they based their whole economy around it, that when they stopped buying slaves, it wasn't a commodity like that anymore, that they basically crashed, and now they didn't have the money that they once had. So that's why it allowed those colonizers, Edomites, to start moving in, and not even I heard one time all of the trains that go back and forth through Africa, all of them got scribble scratch of Japanese and Chinese writing on it, because they the ones moving their products. They got the Silk Road back again going through Africa, man, because they based their slavery so much on you. They got rid of their whole source They what's the word I'm looking for? They real what do you call it? Like their real resource. Their real resource was you. They got rid of that, and then to take on fake resource that was made by somebody else, and then now when we was all taken away, now they lost that. Now they just went to nothing, man. That's why you can go over there, you know, and that's why they was able to come and give them. They started giving them trinkets and stuff like that. That's why African people love Caucasians, man. They love them to death over there, and they still hate you. Little Caucasians, they ready to kiss they behind as well, man. They love them. Go to South, like the only ones that had a little bit of pressure from them, like to feel it, was like South Africa, but they still love them over there too. Love all them bastards, man. Yeah, Mandela, all of them. They love all of them, man. Go ahead.
Mandela spent 27 years in prison, and Winnie Mandela tried to have him come out with that revolutionary spirit when he came out.
Mm-hmm.
He still wouldn't do it.
Exactly.
After 30 years in prison.
You love them, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what they do. They come out. They set up ways to oppress you and make you weaker, and then give little trinkets to you, man. They did that to Native Americans. They made them cold. They took all of their sheep and their cattle, because you know the Native Americans, they used to eat the buffalo, right?
Right.
And they would use the buffalo furs and all of that as covering, as clothing. That's where you start getting like leather. That's where leather comes from, Native Americans, right? So they made all of these things to make it so that they have, clothing, but they just built mounds and they killed the Cape buffaloes, man. You can find a picture literally that shows that. So they killed your resource that you relied on, and then give you a blanket with syphilis in it, with smallpox, to then lower your numbers, right? Go ahead.
So a picture with the skulls, the buffalo skulls.
Yeah, it was a picture of it.
They did all this in unison. North America, West Coast of Africa. Well, nobody else can treat like that, but the 12 tribes.
Exactly, man. They did all that. It's all happened at the same time, man. So they had to find some more people to oppress. That's why they come over here, man. They weren't oppressing us enough over there.
Try to take us out.
Yeah, man.
Zero.
Exactly. So when they end up happening, so then they just weakened them, just like they weakened everywhere else. And then it's like a Roman tactic. They learned this from Alexander, the so-called great. It's just you weaken a nation. That's why they set up, barriers around your gates and all of that. So then you weaken you as a people. You starve yourself out to, starve yourself. And then as you get weaker, they're able to come in and attack you. That's all it really is. They weaken the African nations by, taking all of their people out, and then say we don't want to buy no more slaves now. It's more. We have a moral obligation to not take any more slaves. They just changed their mind that they didn't want to be holy all of a sudden, and now just killed their whole economy, and then now they subject to be taken over. All right, let me see. All right, let's see here. Slavery is defined thus by the British writer Duncan Clark in his 1998 book, Slaves and Slavery, The Reduction of Fellow Human Beings to the Legal Status of Chattels, allowing them to be bought and sold as goods. Is the background to the Arab slave trade, commencing more than 700 years before the transatlantic slave trade. The sub-Saharan slave trade, also known as the Arab slave trade, in the late 7th century, after the Arabs successfully defeated and took over Egypt and soon controlled North Africa, East Africa, and parts of West Africa, such as northern Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, and Nigeria, because They started converting people. That's what Mansa Musa. He was converting over. See, like that's the thing that's so powerful right there, right? Y'all see how that happened. Mansa Musa was an African, right?
Right.
That became Muslim. But what ended up happening? He had to go to Mecca, right? To go as part of his, religion. So even though they are heathens, he had to go to another heathen nation to get that, to, as part of his religion. So in turn, that even weakened Africa right there. Think about that. Just like how that's why these so-called the so-called the man, they call himself a Jew, right? That's why he didn't want to have a religion that he had to go somewhere else to get, because he seen that would weaken you. And you see, that's what happened to this African. He had to go over there. Now he started bringing in all of the Arabs over here. Now they was able to get taken over. With full control over a great part of Africa, the Arabs captured young boys and girls and took them to Egypt, where they were sold into slavery within Africa, or taken across the Indian Ocean to Indonesia, China, Southwest Asia, and India. The castration of male slaves soon became a habit among slave traders due to the fact that castrated boys were in higher demand. They were noted to work faster and more efficient and stronger, and were not a threat to slave masters and owners who feared that their wives, concubines, and female slaves would have affairs with them. They didn't want their slaves to have an affair with them, man. They slave. They a slave too, man. What you gotta say?
I didn't even know all that was written in there. Like they talking about they work faster and more diligent.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, you ain't got nothing else to live for. You know what I'm saying? I'm being for real, man. Yeah. I mean, but they probably did this as a young age, though. You know what I'm saying? They probably didn't do this like as, you 30 years old. You thinking as a 30-year-old. You're not thinking as you've been a slave your whole life. They cut your stuff off, at an age that they could have done it at 6 or 7. You then pretty much grew up not having it, so you don't even know, what's the big deal. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man. They probably did this as children, man. You don't even know. All right. They feared that even female slaves would have affairs with them. That's how you know these was black men. You know this. Right? The castration process usually had the testicles of young boys removed. However, in some extreme cases, the penis was cut off altogether. Good night.
Oh, so what's castration? I thought that was castration was.
Yeah, but they kind of let you do that so you can urinate. But sometimes, yeah. That's the only reason why they let you keep it. But they know, like, your whole, in order for you to, like, want to procreate, you have to have your, stones. That's what keeps your hormones, so you want to procreate. But if you take that away, you're not like a dog. You don't really have, like, most of the time you castrate an animal or whatever, he don't have that same desire. He's more subservient. You know what I'm saying? They take away that extra, that strength from somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Hell on earth.
Yeah, man. David Livingstone, the British missionary, explorer, and traveler, was so upset by the way Arabs treated their African slaves in 1870. It's 1870, man. It still was going on. They were still doing this. So y'all thought that they stopped. It was still going on, even still. It's 1870 he wrote this, man.
That's after slavery.
As I'm saying, that's after our slavery was done with, right? He wrote back home, and less than I take to talk about it. These is unfortunate creatures, 84 of them, wended their way into the village where we were. Some of them, the elders, were women from 20 to 22 years of age, and there were youths from 18 to 19, but a large majority was made up of boys and girls from 7 to 14 and 15 years of age, right? They was doing all this stuff to the young kids, man. That's what they was trading, the young kids. In the Arabian trade, the trudge against the Sahara in leg and neck chains, and as Livingston describes, necks in large forked sticks and hands tied with bark tongs, was particularly harsh on the land the African slaves. No one knows the true numbers of how many African women were enslaved by Arabs. Only estimates, some of which vary widely, exist as to how many Africans were sold from East to North Africa. This is due to the fact that many of the slaves perished. Scientific research concludes that that about 3 out of 4 slaves died before they reached the market where they were to be sold. So 3 out of 4 slaves died before they even got to the damn market.
It's like
It was a
it's a 25% chance.
yeah that you was gonna make it, man. 75 of them, 75% died, man.
That's it.
And that shows you that they how the little of the disregard they have was because like at least like with me, like if I had slaves, I want all my slaves to make it. That's more money for me. Right? But they didn't even care about you that much. You was like a you got a whole like you got a whole carriage of grapes, right? If a couple grapes fall out, you ain't gonna care. That's how they treating you, like, man. Your whole life. Unlike the Europe, man, let me get that script. Hold on one second. Go ahead.
That's how you know it's about 100 million slaves. Well, out of carelessness, they did 25% only making it.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to be 100 million just to board them. Because we built America. We built a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
Made this country great. So the ones that did make it over here, it still was a lot. That's how you know it was about 100 million that they passed through.
So yeah, man, this was all of them. This wasn't even just one. Go to Jeremiah, read Jeremiah 49 and 8 for me.
Oh,
49 Jeremiah.
Oh no, read 6 for me. Go to 6 first.
49 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
Book of Jeremiah 49 verse 6. And afterward I will bring again the captivity of the children of Ammon.
Ammon, man. That's your Japanese, man. They took part in this too. They was part of that slave trade too. They was the Japanese over there. A lot of times they don't mention all of the different cultures. They don't mention all of them. But they was involved as well, man. Keep going.
Said the Lord
Keep going.
concerning Edom. Thus said the Lord of hosts, is wisdom no more of Teman? Has counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished?
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
Flee ye, turn back, dwell deep, O inhabitants of Dedan.
Mm-hmm.
For I will bring the calamity of Esau upon him.
So you're going to bring the calamity of what Esau's done to the children of God, man. Keep going.
The time that I will visit him.
Keep going.
If great gatherers come to thee, would they not leave some gleaning grapes?
But the grape gatherers came to thee, right? You would think you would leave some of them, but no, they take them all. Keep going.
With these by night, they will destroy till they have enough.
Yep, if they was thieves by night, they were destroyed till they have enough. He said, well, they have destroyed till they had enough. Keep going.
But I have made Esau bare.
Mm-hmm.
I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not.
His seed is spoiled, man. His seed is spoiled. Keep going.
Verse 11, leave thy fatherless children, I will preserve them alive, and let them, and let thou widows trust in me.
He said, leave those fatherless children. God wants them to leave them Israelites alone as those fatherless children, because they killed them all, man. They killed their father. That's why they fatherless children, right? We will preserve them alive and let thy widows trust in him. Keep going.
Verse 12, for thus saith the Lord, behold, they whose judgment was not to drink of the cup of assuredly drunken, art thou, he that shall altogether go unpunished? Thou shalt not go unpunished, but thou shalt surely drink of it.
So he said that for thus said the Lord, those judgment was not to drink of the cup. So the cup is, they were supposed to drink of the cup of wickedness they were doing, right? This was a cup. They was like, like he's used as like a metaphor to say like, it's like the cup of like this cup of wine was wickedness that they were doing to the Israelites, right? And he said they drank it and they got drunken. They surely got drunken. And Arthur, you think you shouldn't go unpunished? Thou shalt not go unpunished, but thou shalt surely drink of it. You going to surely drink of this. Keep going.
For I have sworn by myself, said the Lord, that Bozrah shall become a desolate, a reproach, a waste, and a curse. For all the cities thereof be perpetual wastes.
Keep going.
Verse 14, I have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent unto the heathen, saying, gather ye together and come against her, and rise up to the battle. Like
a lot of this is like, I like this verse because it's like Obadiah, because y'all notice a lot of the terms is similar to Obadiah, right? Y'all noticing that? Y'all knew, y'all didn't realize that?
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, now you say something for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's what the first verse of Obadiah. I heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador said to the heathen, saying, "Gather and battle." That's in the first verse of Obadiah. Then it says, right, read 15.
15. For lo, I will make thee small among the heathen, and despise it among men.
That sounds familiar, right? He's gonna make you small. You may eat them small among all the heathen, right? Keep going.
Verse 16. Thou terribleness hath deceived thee, and thou pride of thy heart.
So he's saying that's what deceived them. They terribleness. They think because they can be so terrible to somebody that nothing could ever come back to them. They say, okay, if we be so terrible, you're going to always be fearful. And you're going to never come back against us, right? Because we great. And then now we put ourselves up high. So now we better than you, right? Keep going.
O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock.
They always dwelled in the clefts of the rock, man. Keep going.
That holdest the height of the hill. Though that shouldest make thy nest as high as the eagle. I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord.
So you said it does not sound like Obadiah. That sound like Obadiah now, right?
Like the exact, this is reiterating what Obadiah got.
God, exactly. So he said, they hold as the height of the hill. They think of themselves as being mighty and powerful, right? And they make their nests as high as the eagle. They live in them caves, man. That's where eagles, they live in high places. Keep going.
Verse 17, also Edom shall be a desolate. Everyone that goeth by it shall be astonished, and shall hiss at all the plagues thereof.
You gotta love that, man. He basically saying that all the people, you're gonna be astonished. You're gonna be like, dang, look at all the stuff that's gonna happen to them and all the destruction they're gonna have. All the plagues is gonna plague Edom, right? Keep going.
18. As in the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, said the Lord, no man shall abide there, neither shall a son of man dwell in it.
he gonna overthrow them just like how he did Sodom and Gomorrah. It was done in an instant, right? I don't know. I just love it. I love this chapter, man. I love this chapter. Go to 20 for me.
Verse 20. Therefore hear the counsel of the Lord that he hath taken against Edom, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman.
Mm-hmm.
Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their inhabitants desolate with them.
So yeah, man, he gonna make this place desolate at so-called Edom, man. Edomites. All right, let me go back to this article real quick, and we're gonna finish our class. All right. All right. Let me see. Is this what it was? Where'd I stop at? Okay, unlike the European slave trade, the Arab slave trade was not an important feature of Arab economies, and it predominantly targeted women who became members of harems whose children were full heirs to their fathers' names, legacies, and fortunes, without regard to their physical features. Like I said, like the whole see that's why they took women, because like Arabs, they believe in a, how do you put it? It's they don't believe in the Bible per se, but they believe in, how do you put it? They believe in a twisted version of the Bible. So they still believed it was, they said, okay, it's okay to go ahead and take their women because the seed is actually with me. And that's how you know nations know the seed is actually with the men. So it's okay to have the women, right? So they took them as slaves so they can be a nasty, pervert. You have a 50-year-old sleeping with all 15-year-olds.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, they didn't care about their physical features, right? Because they just a nasty bastard. They don't care about, like they always try to say, like you know, they hated somebody having a big broad nose or big lips. They just wanted the box, man. They didn't care, right?
Yeah, come.
The enslaved were not bought and sold as chattel the way we understood the slave trade here, but were captured in warfare, kidnapped outright, and hauled to get across the Sahara. Race was not a defining line, and the enslaved were not locked into a single fate, but had the opportunity for upward mobility through various means, including all of ironies, and bearing children, or conversion to Islam. There are those who still contend that the Arab slave traders were themselves indistinguishable from those whom they enslaved, because the word Arab had cultural reference, not racial. Nevertheless, while African scholars in the Mafa, which is Swahili for Holocaust, right, make significant differentiations between the Arab and European slave trades, the enslavement of human beings is an atrocity of unfathomable proportions by any standard, and that is exactly what it was in the Arab world, or is anywhere for that matter. No one knows the numbers of how many African women were enslaved by Arabs, only estimates, some of which vary widely exist as to how many Africans were sold from East to North Africa. This is also due to the fact that many of the slaves perished. So the ones that were taken in, they're still not our people, because they end up laying with, they end up being in those harems or whatever, right? Laying up with them Arabs. So they end up being Arabs anyway. So they're still not our people. Now the women more than likely were our people being sold there. You see what I'm saying? Scientific research concludes that about 3 out of 4 slaves died before they reached the market, before they were sold. The attributable causes were hunger, illness, or exhaustion after long journeys. The Arabian slave trade was maintained till well after the colonization of Africa. It was outlawed in Ethiopia only in 1935 in order to gain international support against the Italian invasion. So they only stopped doing slaves in Ethiopia because they wanted to get international support because the Italians was coming for them. Zanzibar, considered today as one of East Africa's best travel destinations, white sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, and hotels offer tourists from all over the world an unforgettable holiday. Holiday in the other world is like it means like vacation, right? The dark past that man, that's a new word, obfuscated this sunny paradise 200 years ago has been long forgotten. So now you put a big beach out there. Now you go to vacation now where they took your ancestors over, right? See how much left is this. Shared history. Humanity has never known a Holocaust of greater magnitude, savagery, or longevity that perpetrated against the peoples of Africa, one which has never been fully acknowledged and certainly never atoned for. Trying to read through some of this, see what I want to bring out. It is clear to see from the shared history that a large proportion of Arabs, including those who harbor anti-black racism, are the descendants of African women who were kidnapped from Eastern African nations as sex slaves, gave birth to them, and lost their African identities. Now, you had one dude, October 10th, 2010, while addressing the second Arab-African summit in Sirte, the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi apologized to Africans on behalf of Arabs for their enslavement and gruesome treatment during the Arab slave trade. He was the first Arab leader to apologize. Hundreds of years later, you just get a little apology. His iron fist blighted his tenure, but when it came to revolution to Pan-Africanism, he was very resolute and unwavering. He always stressed the need for Africa to be united and stave off Western imperialism at all costs. The end is almost over. The end of slavery. Africa remains the most exploited continent in the history of humanity. More human victims have been acquired from Africa than from all other continents in the world combined. The aftermath of this drain in human and mineral resources is one of the factors in the global condition of African people. Regardless of which way we look at it, slavery was a one-way street, with Africans always being enslaved victims. Like I said, it's always Israelites. Don't, get too involved into it. History tells of no African tribe that kidnapped Europeans and put them in bondage for generations. It's going to be one, but it ain't African. It's going to be Israelite tribes. And conversely, I know not of any African tribe that captured Arab women for centuries and made them sex slaves. The wounds for enduring legacies of transforming human beings into chattel for centuries is incomprehensible. And it's a topic that should be told. It may be black history, but primarily black history. Seemingly, it's preferable to blame the West and concentrate on the European slave trade rather than talk about the past crimes of Arab Muslims. The lingering question still remains: why are students not taught or at least told about the long, extensive, and deadly roles played by Arab and Muslim slave traders? All right. Anybody got any questions on that at all? No questions? None somebody want to bring up? Go ahead.
I don't know if we could use, Deuteronomy 17 and 16 in regards to, these devils, they doing all having all types of women, our women, and we can't have any. You know, it talks about multiplying horses. I don't know if you use that. You know, it's kind of loose, but I don't know if you can use that in a different context. Right.
What was that? Deuteronomy what?
17 and 16.
Okay. Are you talking about how are you trying to put that as? You trying to say like, explain to me how you trying to put it as.
Yes, sir. Just, if I may, just, you know, this law applies to us, but, you know, they taking our women. I think it's how the way it's broken down is you cannot multiply your horses, right? It was like using that metaphor, right? Like, you know, it's supposed to leave one horse for your brother, or, you know, to leave some horses for your brother. But the context, the metaphor is don't multiply women. You know, taking all these you know, whole bunch of women, leave one for the brother. You know what I mean? So they were multiplying women amongst themselves. You know, leave none for us. So not.
Yeah, and they did. Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't use that in this case what you're talking about, but I mean, I see what you're trying to say. But the thing with them, yeah, that's why you're not supposed to be taking all of this stuff because it shows like the wickedness of the other nations because that's what they do. They'll multiply horses. I guess that's the way that's how you can do it. You multiply horses and women, and then you see how it makes them evil towards the people of God, right? That's why you shouldn't do that. Multiply horses to yourself, nor causes the people to return to Egypt. So that means return to bondage, right? You don't want to cause the people to return to bondage again because you want to multiply yourself. You could. I would apply more to what Saul did. He wanted to multiply himself. That's why he did the. You know, he kept all of some of the. You know, a lot of the stuff together or whatever. And he brought us back into Egypt again, which was slavery. That's why the Philistines end up coming over and killing him and Jonathan and all of them, right? That's how they ended up happening. I would put it more towards that. But I see what you were trying to say with it, though. All right, anything else? I'm trying to find this thing they had in the Quran. Hold on. Oh, yeah, this is in the Quran. I don't know how to tell you where it's at. But it says, if you fear that you will not deal fairly with orphan girls, you may marry whichever other women seem good to you, 2, 3, or 4. If you fear that you cannot be equitable to them, then marry only one or your slaves. That is more likely to make you avoid bias. So into their mind, if they can't afford to make it equal among their wives, marry one of your slaves. Y'all get that? That's basically what they're saying. That's what I was looking for. So that's what they telling you. Marry one of your slaves. That's why they would go and lay with they slave women. Because they couldn't, you know, they didn't want the hassle of trying to make it equal between all of their wives, right? But then Islam is supposed to be the fairer religion, you know, contrary to being an Israelite, right? It's supposed to be more fair to women. But he said, nah, well, if you can't make them equal, you just marry one of your slaves then. So anybody else on the call that I didn't get? Anybody else on the attendance I didn't get? Anybody I didn't get? All right. Anything else? Anybody got any questions or anything? Going once, going twice. All right, with that, pass the class over to Precinct Officer Barack Yala.
ISUPK Atlanta security announcements. We are the ISUPK started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for a new brother and sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they're off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. They need transportation to teach. The teacher will, Shalaki, if they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head of the school to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which a brother and sister will court each other. After that 6 month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is commandments, comes out of Numbers 18:21, Malachi 3:8-10, which means 10th in the Hebrew, by Asherah. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you, gives to the Treasury Department or teacher. Upholding convocations we have is Feast of Dedications. November 28th is the start of that. The Feast of Dedication? Okay, yeah, it's Feast of Dedication. Just making sure. All right. And reminder, any Akim that want to join the school to come in all black, that wants to be a trooper, come in all black, start wearing all black boots, shirts, pants, headbands, scarves, and get with your camp leader to find out the address of the camp where we teach and preach at. With that, Israel, Imagine, we want to salute the teacher, Imagine Shabbat, Imagine Barak, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shabrakatah,
Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shabrakatah.
Class and Mish, Yazmatah.
Well, I've been sitting here all day. I've been sitting in this waiting room. And I've been waiting on my friends. Yes, I'm waiting on this conference call. All alone. And I'm on hold. Yes, I'm on
How you hang it up? Oh.
I hope it's not all day. Well, I wonder where
Okay, turn it on.